So revenge pornography involves a couple who, in the context of a consensual relationship, manufactures an explicit image or an explicit video, and all parties depicted agree to do that as part of their sex life. And then after the relationship ends, one of the parties then makes that image or that video available to other people, normally online, and they do so without the consent of the other person. So we've known about revenge porn since at least the 70s. There have been incidents in the States and in Australia where a VHS home movie was manufactured between couples, celebrity couples, and then after they've split up, the tape's been made available on the commercial market. With a VHS cassette tape, you can only watch it, of course, if you've got the tape. And what's happened with the advent of the internet and then the popularity of digital video cameras in phones and so on, is that more and more people can make video, but also if they choose to circulate it without the consent of the other person, an explicit image or an explicit video, it's much easier to do, and circulation becomes global in a way that it never did before. It's a really good question, and what we see online is a particular sort of culture of misogyny developing on some discussion boards, in some areas of social media, where women are treated as a kind of sport, and in effect having their image, but also having their name, their address, their phone number, which often gets packaged up with revenge porn. It becomes part of almost like a collective game. I think these men and boys don't fully understand just the sheer impact of what they're doing on these girls and women, but there's also an aspect where they just don't care. It's become a way that some men and boys are sort of bonding online, and it's extremely problematic. Most of what we know about revenge porn comes from the United States, where victims have mobilised and developed a social movement. They've become very political, they've banded together, and they've done that to combat the stigma and to combat the harassment and to share strategies and stories and support one another. But that issue around combating stigma is really important. What these women are saying is, we've got every right to make those images and those videos, and we should be able to trust our partners, and we should be able to trust the online community to treat us with respect regardless of the images that we make. The reports in Australia are more anecdotal. We've certainly had some women who have spoken to the press and the media about their experiences of revenge porn in Australia. And some bloggers have also uncovered revenge porn websites here in Australia. But I think it very much remains an emerging issue. And it's something that I don't think the federal government has really tackled in a fulsome sort of way. We have Victorian legislation that now does criminalise revenge pornography, but in other jurisdictions it's very, very difficult to prosecute. And I think in Australia that's very much keeping victims silent. It affects them in a range of ways. There's that sheer psychological and emotional impact of the betrayal. After the end of a relationship, obviously that's a really messy time in everyone's life, but to then find that your partner's done something so sadistic and so hurtful, that's a major sort of psychological impact. And that's then amplified by knowing that the material is freely available and it's being circulated. So at that point we see a sort of a snowball effect where girls and women become really concerned about whether other people are going to recognise them, other people are going to see them, particularly given that revenge porn is often posted alongside the woman or the girl's name. So when their name's Googled, there's a lot of concern about the reputational damage. And then we have those real life impacts where men and boys will begin to contact the girl, the woman, and in worst case scenarios, her family, her employer, things like that. It's a really good question. I don't think that there are many available legal avenues. There are laws around the circulation of obscene material, for example, that have been used in a couple of cases here in Australia. those laws were really drafted in order to censor obscene press material. They're not really designed for these sorts of scenarios, but they have been used a few times. But I think at the moment the law remains a little murky. It's really unclear what avenues of legal redress. Outside Victoria, which has made moves to criminalise the non-consensual circulation of explicit images, I think other jurisdictions are going to be watching and they're going to be seeing what's happening in Victoria and how that legislation is being used. I don't think there's any question about the value of social movements of the kind that we've seen in the United States that have been formed by victims of revenge porn, that have provided a source of support and resources and legal referral, but also the amount of political lobbying that these groups have done has been instrumental in the passing of legislation in the United States with the aim of criminalising revenge porn and simply raising the issue. I think at the moment in Australia, the lack of a coordinated political and social movement for victims of online gender-based abuse has kept the issue out of the public eye. So I think these social movements are very important. What we see with each new evolution of social media and each new permutation of social media is we see new developments in the way it can be used to bully and harass. And that's true really broadly. There are many examples of, school kids that experience, forms of bullying and harassment on things like Snapchat and through Tinder. You can set up a fake account and then you can try and pretend date someone. And there's an aspect of that where it's just kind of a joke, and then it starts to very quickly blur into a kind of quite sadistic intent to hurt someone and damage their reputation. So it becomes really difficult for us to predict how a new social media platform is going to be used. People are incredibly creative in the way that they adapt to this technology. But I think what we are seeing very consistently is particularly in young relationships, people in their teens and early 20s, there really is a lot of sexism in those peer cultures. There's a lot of issues around gender power imbalances and gender stereotypes, people's interpersonal relations at that period of their life in particular. And social media is at the moment, it's a way at times of amplifying that and really playing on that. And it's something that not only girls and women need to think about, but it's something that we need to be having a really sensible conversation with boys and men about how they're using this technology and why.